Well, good morning, afternoon, and evening, everybody, depending on where you're joining us from today. My name is Robert Wilson, and I'm the General Manager for Workforce Development here at the ARA. Can I take the opportunity to welcome you today to the first of a series of webinars that the ARA is putting on for our members, and they'll be covering a range of topics over the coming months. The ARA represents the rail sector in both Australia and New Zealand, and we have over 150 members, many of whom are joining us today. And they represent both passenger and freight operators, track owners and managers, suppliers, manufacturers, contractors and consultants. And we work with our members to deliver results for the industry. Today we have over 350 people registered for the webinar, and I'd like to thank them and all participants for this. So webinars have been introduced to support you, our members, in these challenging times, and a full list of upcoming events is available on our website. In addition, we will make information available via our direct emails and alerts to you as we add to that list. Today, I'd like to extend a special welcome to our very first presenter, Dr. Polly McGee. Polly is an author, leadership facilitator and program designer and disruptor for good. With over a decade working in innovation and commercialisation, leadership program design and delivery in public, university and private sector roles, Polly has a strong background in combining coaching, facilitating, teaching, curriculum design and content authoring with the search for meaning and purpose. Polly is one of over 400 people selected to be globally trained by Dr. Brené Brown in her Dare to Lead certified program facilitation, which Polly has now delivered across Australia. Polly is the designer and facilitator of the ARA Future Leaders National Program, now in its third year. And Polly is very happy to take your questions today, so I would encourage you to lodge your questions as we go along on the system, and Polly will come back to your questions at the end of her presentation. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Polly.
Thank you so much, Robert. And hi, everyone. How are you guys going? Strange times that we live in, but I'm really super glad to hear. And I want to really acknowledge the support of the ARA and how proactively and quickly they got on board to get this webinar series designed so we could all keep communicating. I'm especially happy to see that we got to do this topic first. I think it's so relevant right now. I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country that I'm standing on, the Noongar people of Lutcha. And I want to acknowledge elders past and present where I am and also wherever you guys are as well. So I'm Polly. Thank you for that great introduction, Robert. I'm a leadership and strategy and culture consultant, but one thing I'm massively is a remote working. I moved to Tasmania in 2005, looking for the dream of being able to choose the place where I wanted to live, cool climate wine, lots of outdoor activity, and be able to work anywhere in the world. It's taken a little while for culture to catch up with that, but the technology and the culture is certainly there to support us doing that. One of the reasons that I'm so proactive and so excited about remote working is that I think for the jobs that are able to be done this way, it really enables us to have a really much more connected and integrated life with our work. We don't have this idea of a workplace and a home place anymore. We're the same people wherever we are. So remote working really enables this. And the body of really what I want to talk about today is how now we've been all largely thrust into this new world of working. How we can really think about what culture is, what community is, how to build them in a distributed way, and where leadership emerges in that place. So as I said, I've been remote working since 2005 in various different guises. I've trained quite a lot of companies in how to do remote working. I've operated remote teams globally in different companies I've worked for. And I wrote the policy for the state government in Tasmania on how to do remote working and also how to make remote working something which is a really appealing investment attraction piece. And what you'll find when the world goes back to normal, and let's hope it's soon, is that many people will want to continue doing their jobs the way they are now. This will be a game changer for a lot of organisations. Right, so let's have a look at the learning app today. I want to have a look at what remote means for distributed leadership, moving away from that quite traditional control and command model. I want you to think about how you can help your team to thrive as they transition to a remote situation. Keeping in mind that we are all transitioning right now. Even though we're there and doing it, this hasn't been a strategic and calculated play. This has been very much a reaction to global circumstances. So it's probably time to innovate slowly and take a breath and really think about how it can work. I want you to understand better how community and culture is seeded and the importance of that. And also how to empower everyone across the organisation to become community leaders in your business. So we'll meander around the place as well, around the way, but that's really what I want you to get out of today. As Robert said at the beginning, we'll be doing questions at the end. I want to leave about 15 minutes for questions, so please feel free to type away as we go and take notes if there's anything that you want to know more about. And I believe you'll be able to get a copy of this recording afterwards. So if you missed anything in your excitement, don't worry, you'll be able to catch up. So let's talk about culture. Culture is always designed. Discuss. So what does that mean? What that means is that I haven't seen a great number of organisations in the rail sector that are investing a lot of time into building culture. So that's not a criticism, it's an observation. What we tend to do is we do the work of the day, what we have to do, what we're getting done for our stakeholders, but we don't often see the value in investing in culture. The interesting part of that is that culture is always designed. So it's designed as much in lack as it's designed in really conscious activity. If you don't invest in designing a culture, empower your people, if you don't have a clear understanding of what it is to create culture in your business, it will happen around you, and it will happen in a way that's going to give you a petri dish that hasn't got the right kind of bacteria that you want. So just know that it's going to happen whether you do it or not. So the best thing is to get on the front foot and really start thinking about it. Because of what has happened with COVID-19 and how it's thrown us all into this sort of situation of chaos, it's a really good time to revisit and look at a number of the ways we've done things and see if there are different or better ways to do things. As I said at the outset, I believe when we come out of the COVID-19 restrictions, business and the way we do business is not going to look the same. We're not going to go back to how we did it before. So this is a really potent time for us to be able to have a really good look at what we're doing and why, and think about where the ROI is on really investing in culture and, of course, in our people. The absolute central cortex of remote and distributed teams and remote working and building culture and community is trust. Without doubt, it is the most central thing. When you've got it, you can really operate from anywhere and your people feel like there's a safe container built from them and that they're able to get on and do their work. A friend of mine was talking to me recently who is the chief of staff for a state government department. And she was saying, this is when we first started to be all moved into our houses or moved remotely to work. And I was saying to her, what are you still doing in the office? You know, we've been given a mandate to go home. And she said, oh, the boss basically said we have to work because he doesn't trust anyone. I found that really distressing. And for me, that is not a trust issue. That's actually a culture and a management issue. So if you've got a team of people working for you that you don't trust enough to be able to let them get on and do their work without being line of sight, then you've got a much bigger problem than COVID-19 and remote working. But unfortunately, over the years, I've heard this time and time and time again. We're really conditioned to think that seeing someone is productivity, whereas there's so much presenteeism in workplaces as it is, that the actual making people go remote gives you an opportunity to see what work looks like when it's driven by output. So there are 4 components that are really important. Trust. The right people are in the job. And again, quite often what we find in organisations is people get promoted because they've been sitting in the seat for a while. People get moved there because there was a reactive need at the time. But we haven't always looked to see if we've got the right person sitting in the right place. So that's the first thing we need to understand. The right person is there. Do they have the right tools? Are we as leaders and managers empowering them with everything they need to be able to get on and do it? And are we giving them the right support? Do they know we're there? Do they know that they can have a true and clear and open communication with us? And then are we ready to let them get on with the job? This is critically important when we're moving into a remote and distributed workplace from visible teams for those people who are managing within place-based organisations. Are we able to just let them get on with the job and trust that they will be doing the right thing because it is human nature to do the right thing. If we believe that, then we are able to much more easily support our people. So what's the connective tissue of culture? There's three things, and I'm going to really hammer a couple of these across the presentation. One is alignment around purpose. Now, what does that mean? That means that as a community, we understand what it is that we're doing. As an organisation, we understand what we're doing, and we all have that purpose. We are pointed in the same direction, and we're all able to move towards that together. Now, you might think that that is something that everyone understands. They all know what they're doing if they're in your organisation. But I would suggest if you did a straw poll of your staff and you ask them to tell you what the purpose of your organisation is, what you will find very quickly is that people are working to very different purposes and a very different shared understanding. So the first thing to do, particularly in a remote situation, is get people clear on the purpose and the alignment. Why is everyone getting out of bed in the morning and doing this? What is it that you are doing that is making a difference in the world? This is critically important to who we are as people. We are hardwired to have connection and we're hardwired to find meaning in our lives. And if we don't really have a shared understanding of that, it's a really difficult way for us to be able to get out and do what we're meant to do, particularly when we're in a situation that is not normal or ordinary. So that shared definition has to be across the workplace. The shared definition has to be something that everyone I speak to in your organisation can tell me exactly what it is that you do and why it's important. And the final piece of this connective tissue is that it's demonstrated, not decorative. We need to move away from overarching gauzy sort of values and missions to actually move into operationalised missions. We need to know not only that we have a shared definition of what we do, but that we can say how we do it. And I can tell anyone in my organisation how they're actually demonstrating what they're doing. So it can't be gauzy and it can't be stuck up on a wall. And we're going to get to that a bit more now when we talk about the shared definition. I suspect in your organisation you would have a values statement. The majority of organisations have them. What I see all the time, particularly in the leadership work that I do, is value statements that have no operationalisation in them. They've got things like respect and integrity and trust, which are all really great things. Don't get me wrong. But those things have no inherent value unless they're operationalised and I can see how they operate inside of the organisation. So not only do we need to have a shared definition of what our purpose is in a more macro sense, what the mission of the business is, we have to have a shared definition of values and how we do those values. If you're going to continue on with the seminar series, we'll be doing a leadership seminar on values a bit later on. So sign up for that if you have any questions about this. We have to see those values in behaviours and we have to see those behaviours in every single part of the organisation. We don't just have to see them being acted out, we actually have to see them being rewarded or we have to see them being sanctioned if those behaviours don't match with the values. We have to know the reason that we're there, which comes back to the piece about alignment with purpose. We have to know the reason we're doing what we're doing, what our reason is and what the reason is from the organisational perspective. And we have to have some shared artefacts. And this is sort of an interesting one because this is about taking these ideas from the more esoteric and more theoretical into the real. What are the shared artefacts that fit inside your organisation? Now, these are tangible things. It might be that you wear a uniform and you have a logo on. When you put that logo on, you feel that you're part of a group. Much as we're hardwired for connection, we're hardwired for belonging. It's part of our primal ancestral physiological urges. And we need to see the markers of what it is that puts us in that group. So what does your organisation have that gives people artefacts? It might be as simple as that when they sign up, they'll get a little mascot, or perhaps it's just having a work email that everyone shares. We need to see the artefacts that make us part of a group. And they're the things that help us feel that we have a belonging and a shared definition. I just want to circle back a little bit to this idea about how you make culture. And to reinforce that culture is always distributed. So even if you've largely been in a place-based organisation where you go into an office every day or you go into wherever it is that you work from collectively underneath your brand header, you take the culture in and you take it out with you. Culture is human experience. We make it ourselves, and it's our interpretation and it's our meaning of what's happening in the world. It defies bricks and mortar. It's not an artifact of the buildings that we're in. It's created by us. And that's really important as well, because for those that are still clinging on to loving having a workplace to go to, in the new world order where we work from home or we work from the third space, which might be a co-working space or wherever it is, we create that culture through digital means, and we create that culture through the connectivity that we have in the ways that we communicate with each other in an organisation. It's essence, it's not place. And this idea of essence is what it is that makes us who we are and makes that culture what it is. So I encourage you to think about what is the essence of your workplace? What is the essence of your culture? Can you articulate it? Can you write it down and again? Is it part of a shared definition? And finally, when we think about culture being distributed and now all of you performing your roles in your team in a distributed environment, that what binds us defines us. What binds us defines us. And again, this is not always something which is positive. So if we're in a culture which is bound by openness and trust and camaraderie and vulnerability, the capacity to fail, the capacity to make mistakes, that is going to be what binds us together, that we all are feeling we're pointing in the same direction. If we're bound by a culture which is made up of bullying and secrecy and punishment and shouting, hierarchy, jobs for the boys or girls, whatever it is, that's the culture which binds us as well, and that's the culture which we will create and we will choose to be in or not choose to be in, and that we will propagate in the way we do things. One thing I hear all the time when I'm doing the leadership program, Future Leaders, from the young leaders who are coming up, is they often talk about the problems that they have breaking through the way we do things around here. And the way we do things around here is kind of code for a middle management ceiling that they aren't able to crack through, and they might have ideas of innovation, but we don't want to do this. We don't want to take the risk of failing. So just be really clear that culture and what binds us doesn't necessarily have to be a positive thing, and that we're in this really ripe and beautiful opportunity to be able to start changing the way we do things around here, because we can't do things the way we used to anymore. So as I said, it's a potent time for change. Okay, let's have a look at the essence of culture. The reason that I'm just banging on about culture so much is that culture is such a fundamental part of how we get teams to perform well and how we get an idea of shared and belonging concepts that allow us to work out of a singular environment. It's just so critically important. And aside from that, when you have culture that's done right, when you have leadership that sits in a culture that's done right, there are such immense productivity gains. It's not just for the warm feel-good part, which is of course something that we want to have in the environment. We want soft skills, we want soft diplomacy, we want to feel good about what we do. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is you get some really fantastic productivity gains. And when you're talking about a remote and distributed workforce, there's also an incredible amount of savings that can come from releasing yourself from expensive infrastructure. That's worth thinking about as well. So, what's the essence of culture? 4 things. What is the threshold membership to your organisation? So I said earlier that culture is a really critical part of belonging, that we need to belong as humans, as primates. We want to be in a group. What is the threshold membership to your organisation? And for many of us, we probably haven't ever really thought about this. The threshold membership can be something as simple as you wear a tag around your neck to go into a building, or you have an email and everyone has that email. So once you join the organisation in whatever way, whether it's full-time, part-time, consultant, you name it, there's a threshold membership that you have to cross. That makes it the first brick that builds us into this idea of culture and belonging. Another thing that is a very important part of the essence of culture is who has the influence and when and where do they wield that influence. Now so more than ever, when we're outside of rooms and when we're in this very specific remote way. You'll be doing a lot of meetings like this, a lot of meetings on Zoom, a lot of meetings in teleconference where you're going to start seeing who wields the influence, who has influence, who has a voice in the organisation, whose voice is listened to, and whose voice isn't listened to. It's a really important part of culture because it sends us a message as employees and as team members as to where we fit in the pack. As I said, we might look like we're very well-groomed, evolved humans, but we operate in a very primal way biologically and neurologically. Our brains are hardwired to look at pack behaviour and to understand who we need to align with, who we need to move towards, who we need to move away from, how we need to get where we get to get influence, because our limbic brains want us to stay safe. They want us to be inside the power group. So think about that in your organisation. Who has the influence and how is that being shown in an overt way? How is that being shown in a covert way? It's really important because that is going to be some of the seeds of culture which are being planted. How are the needs of your people fulfilled? And more importantly, how do you know what those needs are? When you're in an office environment, it's easy in some ways if you're an engaged and hands-on manager to be able to walk the floor, talk to people, see what's going on, ask the question of what people's needs are. And once you get a feel for what people do, you sort of subtly understand when things aren't right, when there's something that's not working out. In a situation where you don't have that tangible, tactile, sort of physical, all-of-body, non-verbal communication opportunity, how do you get people to tell you what their needs are? How do you anticipate what they are? And how do you fulfill them? Also, most critically important in connecting people together in community for culture in a remote and distributed way is the idea about emotional connections being shared. So when we're working in this way, one of the key things that actually builds culture for us are emotional connections. We aren't able to read body language when we're separate from each other, when we're distributed. So we need to find ways to get people to talk to how they feel. We need to get them to be vulnerable. It's a really critical piece. We talk about vulnerability a lot in the leadership training that I do because vulnerability is the new core leadership tool. So not only does that mean you have to be vulnerable as a leader, it means that your people have to feel safe and they have to build emotional connection. We don't build connection by talking about our fantastic outputs and how many metrics we've hit this week. We build emotional connections by talking about how we feel. Again, in a culture in many rail organisations where it's quite a largely engineering-based culture, it's a very masculine culture on the whole, we aren't necessarily raised, trained or educated to discuss our emotions and how we feel. When we are remote, when we're in a time of chaos, when we're in a time of fear, even less so. So as leaders, we have to find ways to allow emotional connections to be shared. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how that can happen when we get into a toolbox session later on. So that's the essence of what culture is. What we need to really bed that down is seeing people be engaged. Now, engagement is kind of like values. We hear people talking about it all the time. But engagement, we've got to remember, engagement is an outcome. It's not an aspiration. We don't do great engagement around here. Engagement is how I know that I'm doing all of these elements and I'm using these tools to bring my people together. So it's important to think about that. What does it mean to engage in your workplace? When you say your workplace is really engaged, what does that mean? You need to get specific and you need to understand what engagement looks like in your team, in your broader workplace, in your management teams. You need to understand how it is that people are coming together to form community. Again, the shared purpose. One of the elements of being aligned to a shared purpose is, are we all solving the same problem? It's really surprising in teams where you aren't working to very clear outputs, which you often are in an engineering sense. In a lot of the startups I work with, they're very output driven, so they work fantastically remotely because people know what they have to do. But it's really worth asking the question, what is the problem that we're solving? Because quite often as I'm going along in my little box over here and someone's in their little box over there working on our thing, we kind of lose sight of that bigger picture. Particularly now where we are potentially not communicating at frequency and not having the same level of visibility with our team members, we have to be really present to the horizon conflict. What is it coming down the pike from management or from the executive or from government if you're a government agency where you're getting a lot of pressure on one hand that the team that is doing the doing and doing the delivery is not able to see that instead of having a clash. We call it a horizon conflict. My horizon looks very different to your horizon, and you're needing me to deliver something, but I'm trying to deliver against my timeline. This comes down to communication, and again, we're going to have a chat about how to do communication well remotely. But being clear, and the way to get clear is to ask your team what they're doing and why, to be really clear everyone's on that same page. We want people in distributed and remote teams to have intrinsic rather than extrinsic motivation. What that means is that I am motivated internally and I am driven to achieve, I'm driven to complete, I'm driven to engage, I'm driven by purpose, I'm not driven by reward. You will have seen metrics that have been coming out for years around how there's a set point of people's income where once they get to a certain threshold, they're not motivated by money anymore. I think that threshold is around $75,000. It might be a bit more. But that basically means that people are much more motivated by things like time, getting to spend time with their family, getting to have leisure activities, getting to be able to exercise when they want to do it, which is why this world of remote working and this culture and community that can be created around a non-place-based environment means that people have a lot more intrinsic motivation. They aren't looking for those rewards. So we have to recognize what it is that people need to be intrinsically motivated. And they need to be safe. They need to have their needs met. They need to be heard. And they need to be given that trust to be able to do things and to self-actualize in a psychological sense. That's what people need. So we want to promote that in our teams and in our culture. As leaders and as managers and as employees and as citizens, we need to model this behaviour. We need to be the culture. And it comes back to one of the earlier slides where I was saying that we can't do this if it's gauzy. Unless it's demonstrated, it doesn't exist as far as staff are concerned. And it's so critically important. All right, let's get into some nitty-gritty of some tools. Alignment. We've had that before. I'm going to go back to it. What do we do here and why? Get everyone clear. Make sure that you are all doing the same thing and you all know what that is. It's a good time to revisit that at the same time as you might be revisiting what your values are, what your organisational mission is. Things are changing and reshaping so quickly at the moment. And we're kind of all in that mindset. We're a little hyper-vigilant and we're a little hyper-alert. And that kind of puts us in not a bad position to be able to really rethink the way we've done things around here and move them so they're somewhere different. It's worth having a look at it. It's worth talking to your teams about it. Another critically important piece. Does everyone have equal access to being their best? And not only that, how do you know that's the case? Now, this is a really important place where we need to address our subjective biases. We can't assume that everyone has, what I luckily had, this ideal environment where there aren't children running into the room, there aren't dogs barking. There's just a really nice space where I can have a hardwired Ethernet connection and I can do my work uninterrupted with good, strong technology. I recognize often how lucky I am to have that. When people have been thrown into remote work, many people are working in very suboptimal circumstances. So you need to know what your people are doing. Do they have access the same as everyone else? Do they have the same levels of literacy that allow them, digital literacy and others? If you have people that have been working on non-digital systems for a long time, they might be finding the nuances of learning something like Slack or working out how to get all the different pieces of technology to talk or even how to do something like this webinar. They might find that very difficult to access. Most of us don't want to talk about our lack, so we just don't do it. We sit in shame and we think, I just won't participate. That silence is a really terrible thing to have in building culture. So you must be vigilant in finding ways to respectfully find out if people have what they need. Have they got the level of ability that's needed? If they have any disabilities of any sort, how are you looking after them? How are you making sure they're safe in their workplace? How are you making sure that they're safe in their remote workplace? Super, super important. And again, think about the women in your teams. I have many female friends who are in situations where everyone's working from home, but the burden of education and running their jobs and doing the same stuff they do in the house is still falling to them in a disproportionate way. So really think about, are you acknowledging that some people might be actually shouldering a heap more burden than others? And also they may have aging parents. There might be other things in the mix that are needing to have a lot of extra care at this time. We can't assume that everyone is going to walk into a space because they've been made remote that is going to allow them to easily do their work. So that's really important. If you haven't thought about access before in a detailed way, now is the time. And again, you can't assume that people will speak up and talk about what they need. You need to find a way as a leader and a manager to ask for it and allow them to tell you what they need. We've all kind of been thrown into our homes. It was like we were just catapulted out of business, sort of into our studies or our spare bedrooms or the kitchen table. Many organisations, therefore, particularly organisations that weren't already doing remote working or had distributed cultures, there's no real guidelines for how to do this. And I think this is a time where we need to think about setting our organisations up for the future. So when we do get out of the COVID mess that we're in now, we can really have a very clear policy and clear guidelines and good onboarding for how people do this work from home. So do you have the guidelines in your organisation, and bring it down to you in your teams in the way that you operate? Do you have the guidelines for how to behave, for who leads and who follows, what behaviour is rewarded and what behaviour is sanctioned? It's really important to get them down and to actually document them, do it in a way which is co-designed with your team, and to have that enshrined as part of your organisational culture and behaviour. If there aren't guidelines, people don't know what to do. In these times, we need to be able to take positions of leadership from all over the organisation and let people know that they're safe, that they're secure in what they're doing, and that they are going to be able to do their work in the way that is meaningful for them. You can think of this as your cultural front door. It's the same as the way you set up your foyer if you had an office. So you want people to come in and to be welcomed and to feel like they knew what they were coming into and they could read all the verbal cues or the non-verbal cues, but how to move through that building and that organisation. This is very true for digital spaces as well. So we need to understand what the digital spaces you're working in are. How do you create an entry point into your organisation, even if it's just for every meeting that you're going into, that people feel warm and wanted and welcome? That needs to be constructed and designed. Culture is designed, and we need to design that part of it particularly. How do you measure and calibrate sentiment in your organisation? So in this brave new world, some of you might have been doing it already and using things like employee net promoter scores. If you haven't heard of an employee net promoter score, also known as an ENPS, they're kind of like the things where you see something on Amazon and you'll get a little pop-up that says, how did you enjoy this from 1 to 10 or 1 to 5? What was your experience? It's usually just, a little quick graph and you click on it and on you go. And that builds up an algorithm of data that tells you how people experienced you. Quite a lot of organisations use an ENPS now, which allows people to show in an anonymous way how they are experiencing the culture of their workplace. If you aren't currently using this, now is probably a good time to think about how that will help you to measure and calibrate sentiment and culture. People are, because it's anonymous, are much more inclined to speak out and tell you what's going on, and there are some quite sophisticated web-based systems. Anyway, if you just do a Google on ENPS, you can find something that you can apply to your organisation. Absolutely critical for being able to jump on problems before they become unmanageable and really take your culture. There has never been a better time to communicate often and clearly. Tell people what you're doing, tell people how you're doing it, tell people when you've done it, ask them if they understood, and tell them again. There is no room for ambiguity in these circumstances, because in the absence of information, people will make up stories because we need to know what's going on. So now more than ever, assumption is the most dangerous thing that you can possibly do in your organisation. For some people, they will run to this like a duck to water. This is just my idea of heaven. Chaos, change, doing things differently, adopting new technology. I love that. I'm one of a very small subset of personality types that really thrive in chaos. But there's a lot of people who are in your organisation who will be finding this experience incredibly upsetting, really difficult to transition into, and they aren't going to be performing at their peak, and they're not going to be knowing what to do, and they're going to be really looking for some clear guidance and some clear leadership. We're building new neural pathways as we do this work, as we adapt to being at home and not having to go somewhere. All the things we're doing at the moment, all of us are building a ton of new neural pathways, which is confusing and distracting and all of those things. So while we've been thrust here quickly, it's really important to innovate slowly. Test what you're doing. Co-design it with your people. Every single person in your organisation needs to have the opportunity to contribute to discussions as to how you're building culture and community, how it's all working and how you're taking it forward, and how they're able to best contribute to that culture, community and output. More importantly, the work needs to get done, but we need to get people to do it with us as a group. So co-design, that idea that we are trying things out, measure the success, adapt and fail fast, and then do it again. We are needing to be in very agile and constantly iterative processes right now. Those people who work in agile project management, you'll be loving this and you'll know just how to do it. Those who work in waterfall, so you need to move your teams along that spectrum of participation. For every one person like me, you're probably going to have 20 or 30 people who are just, not diving in quite so head first. You need to know what people are doing. If you have a mix of introverts and extroverts in your team, and for what I've seen when we've measured the introverts and extroverts in the Future Leaders program, we get about 75% introverts in the rail sector. There's a smattering of extroverts and there's a handful of ambiverts who sort of sit in the middle. Your introverts will be totally fine. There's nothing they love more than being in their homes, working on their computers. This is like their idea of manna. The extroverts, not quite so much. And your extroverts will be really suffering and they will perform really well when they're in teams and in dynamic environments and having discussions. So think about the mix of personality types you're managing and you're looking after, and just check in to make sure that everyone is doing okay. As I said before, this work and life are combined. They are all the time, but more so now, more so than ever. So you need to make sure that you guys are doing okay and that not everyone is going to come along as quickly, and you need to work with them. It's weird. It feels weird. For many people, this is just the strangest thing possible. Having Zoom meetings all day long, being only able to see people from the kind of neck up, it's so different to how we operate generally and how we operate in the world. So just honour that, know that, and recognise that that's going to be a sentiment that is happening in your team. And you need to be able to talk about it. This is what emotional connection is. We need to be able to show our vulnerabilities, and we will build culture slowly that way. Discomfort plus time equals growth. We grow in discomfort. Think of it like a muscle. You go to the gym, you lift some big weights, you tear your muscle, it really hurts. You come home and you're like, I'm not doing that for a day or so. The healing time is where the growth happens. You go back to the gym and you're stronger and you're better and you're faster. This is what we're doing now. But we need to be really present and mindful of the pain and of the tearing that's happening for a lot of people. So how are you communicating? There's a number of channels that you'll be communicating on all the time. And as I said in the previous slide, this is about communicating overtly, explicitly, and often. Video is fantastic for deepening trust and connection because we can see faces. As humans, we trust and we connect when we can see each other's eyes. It's the reason they have that expression, I want to see the whites of someone's eyes. We do that because the eyes give us trust. So video is a really good way to be able to not only see people's faces, but also to get a mild sense of body language and what's happening. You can't get it in as clear and quick a way as you can if you're in a room with someone, but you can still get it and you can start to read people's bodies and what's going on for them. So use video as much as you can, but be mindful that asynchronous communication mediated by screen it's the best we're going to get right now, but it doesn't replace other forms like face-to-face sometimes in this time. So when you're communicating, I recommend you use a whole range of different tools. But video is really great. You want to be able to see your team and connect in with them face-to-face at least once a day. Email is, again, another really great tool. Email is traceable and it's more formal. So when you're putting things down, if you're having a video conference, document with email. Tell them verbally, tell them on email, make things really clear. There's nothing quite so comforting as just getting a phone call as well. You've had a meeting on video, you sent an email, but you want to pick up the phone and say, so is that all clear? Is there anything we want to talk about? People who are screen shy and video shy may much prefer talking on the phone and find that a more intimate way of connecting and a way that they might be able to give you more disclosure about who they are and what's going on for them. I'm assuming quite a few organisations have now moved across to things like Microsoft Teams, Slack, workplaces, but Those tools are really great for forming community. They're part of the artifacts that allow us membership to a group. So we create a lot of cultural connectivity and a lot of communication and community within those channels. So use that as a community builder. Let people have all the channels that bring them together and give them opportunities to talk about non-work things as well as work things. And then you need to play these tools like a symphony. As a manager, your biggest job right now is to be managing your communications and to be checking in with your people. And I understand that there's a lot of deliverables that you've still got. Those things aren't going to get done themselves. But to make sure that your distributed remote community and teams are able to help you deliver those things, you need to be using a combination of these tools as much as possible. So how do we get that elusive engagement as an outcome? Set boundaries from the beginning. This goes back to the guidelines, getting really good onboarding, making sure that people know what is happening, even if you're kind of building the plane as you're landing it or the train as you're driving it in our case. You still need to be really clear on what those boundaries are. What does transgression look like? What does your culture have as an absolute hard yes and there's a hard no? You need to connect people back into the BC culture, as I call it, or the before COVID culture. So remind people what things were like and some of the things that you did. What were some of those cultural elements that you can put across and digitize? We're seeing a lot of this in sort of the digital Friday afternoon drinks and having get-togethers, morning teas, those kind of things that we would have traditionally done face-to-face in our offices. I'm seeing them done really strongly and effectively in organisations using things like Teams and Slack and Zoom, getting people together and getting them to share their emotions, share how they're feeling, and just be together as a group. This is a really great way to break down some of the barriers that exist when we're all distributed and remote. If you can, as a manager, create asynchronous quests and missions for your people. Now, what I mean by that is things aren't necessarily to do with your sort of structured work deliverables. Social activities, get people who don't generally work in teams together to get together and create activities for your team. Create activities and things and actions for your organisation. You might be doing some volunteer work on a little asynchronous team. You might be putting together some kind of a social activity for the whole organisation. Bring people in and give them authority and give them autonomy to do things that will help grow them in the way they do it in their normal day-to-day business. Reward behaviour and call it out when it's bad. There is nothing more toxic to a cultural environment than seeing repeated poor behaviour that isn't taken down by a manager when it needs to be and really strongly rewarded. This is very true of the digital environment as much as it is in the normal environment. One of the reasons that this tends to not happen as much is as leaders and as managers, we are terrible at having difficult conversations. Again, one of the things we cover in leadership and one of the things we'll be covering in one of the seminars later on in this series. So definitely got on board for that. Here are some ways to think about entering a difficult conversation. I just wanted to give you a little taster here because it is really super important. Like all things in comms, you have to be incredibly clear. Clear is kind and unambiguous. If someone is behaving badly online, is behaving badly in team meetings, is just behaving badly full stop, you have to start from a place of compassion and think that the reason they're doing this is not because they're just a bad person, it's because they are frightened and unhappy and they are not settled in this new environment. An entry point for that kind of a conversation rather than, hey, I hated the way you behaved in that meeting, is I'm curious about your behaviour. What was going on for you then? Can we talk about it? You have to listen with empathy to what they're saying and give them enough time to actually get to the heart of what's going on. And that great entry point for this is help me to understand. Help me to understand why you thought it was appropriate to say that or why you thought it was okay to not show up in that meeting. Listen to learn, don't listen to go in as a manager and say what you think because you've made a whole heap of assumptions about what's going on. Ask them to tell me why this doesn't work for you. And use the circle back, which is really important because people are often in the heat of the moment or if something's going down, they're not ready to talk about it. So we can have a little discussion and then you can say, let's circle back tomorrow for some more ideas or I want to get to the bottom of this. It's really about allowing people to come into the conversation with you and tell you. But the key point is you must address it as soon as it happens. And you must empower your team to address it and help them to be able to use this kind of language. What are some of the metrics you may be asking yourself as to how you measure whether you are getting the engagement that you want? These are very much observational metrics, but you can clearly put them into a more sort of hard format. One of the ways that we see engagement really beginning to happen in remote distributed teams is through self-disclosure and sharing. Are people who wouldn't normally potentially be as forthcoming, are they starting to build those relationships with each other? Are they starting to make the connections with their team in a distributed way? And are you seeing that happen for them in meetings? Are they talking about the culture and what you're doing in an unprompted way that is aligned with the purpose? Are people able to really sort of say, hey, that was really great because that's exactly what this company is doing, and we just nailed that when we delivered that project? You want to see the language of purpose and alignment and values starting to be used in an unprompted way. Are you seeing people supporting each other peer-to-peer? Again, in a distributed situation, we want to take the power and authority away from the singular top-down leadership and make it much more peer-to-peer. When people ask the question of, oh, how will I know if people are actually working? The answer to that is because you'll see by their output and because their peers will call them out in the interrelationships of the delivery of projects. So you need to see that peer-to-peer discussion emerging, and that's one of the ways you can tell that the metrics of engagement is starting to work. And do people have a sense of self-moderation and a sense of ownership? Are they able to regulate themselves in meetings? Are they able to make suggestions, take responsibility for things, be autonomous? When, as a manager and a leader, you start seeing those things regularly happen in your team, you know that you're on the road to people starting to have adapted and adjusted and be working really productively, happily and well in this environment. This is really important and something that I'm very passionate about in relation to what is a leader. And we often forget that there are leaders everywhere in our organisations because we see them being attached to titles. Leadership is behaviour. It's how we conduct ourselves, how we operate with others. The days of control and command are over. That's not how effective, productive organisations work anymore. There's a great quote from the head of the Harvard Business School. I think it goes along the lines of, leadership used to be done by muscles. Then it was done by brains, but the leadership of now is done through heart. We say this all the time in the Future Leaders work and in the Brene work that I do, because leaders need to be leading with their hearts and they're everywhere. And we need to particularly now be empowering them in organisations. That doesn't mean we're in a completely flat democracy where everyone's just doing their own thing, because that is just chaos and unproductive. So leadership must be present, and there must be people that we turn to get support before we go back to do our own thing. They emerge organically, and we need to recognise them. We need to reward leadership when we see it directly, and we need to relinquish control. We have to be able to let go and trust people to fail. This future is now. The future leadership is happening. We've sort of been thrust into it. We probably could have done this sooner. We really could have done this sooner. And I've been banging on about this, as many people who know me know, for a long time. People don't need to be sitting in their chairs to be productive in the view of a manager. But this is the time we have now to start really creating organisational cultures around it. Online cultures reveal flaws fast. You can get away with a lot. You can hide a lot in an office that you can't hide in the cold, hard light of output, productivity and engagement on digital channels. So many of you may be starting to see some real fractures in your team. This is great. It's just giving you an invitation to be able to work with that and make them better. You want to onboard for online from top to bottom, i.e. you need to actually onboard people to have moved into this new scenario. We could go back to the earlier slides where I talked about creating some guidelines for that. That has to happen and be demonstrated from the top all the way down. And you need to be really clear. So if you haven't invested in doing that yet, now is the time. And while we're in chaos, let's embrace it. Let's really look for the opportunities to be able to get out of those turgid sort of paradigms of the way we've done it around here and actually say, well, what else can we do? What other ways can we do this? And just because we did it that way was the best way. Let's hoard these. We don't want to hoard toilet paper anymore. What we want to hoard is trust, connection, and curiosity. Trust your people. Make them connect because they feel vulnerable and they feel open and they feel that they can. Lead with curiosity, don't lead with fear. The way we do things down here is we ask questions and we accept a level of failure and we accept that we can do that within a manageable risk. Super important. All right. I want to jump into some questions. Let me have a look and see what we have. What about people who are not used to working remotely and need some help, especially that live alone? This really comes back to that world that we talked about where you have to know your people and what their situation is and are they in a position where they can be the best that they can be. That comes from taking the time as a manager and as a leader to actually get to know someone and to invest that time in them. And you want to be asking the questions, what is your situation? How are you set up? How are you feeling? The alone part of that question, and that's a really important thing. That's going to impact if you're feeling isolated, alone, probably frightened. That's going to impact on the way you do your work. So for a manager, the situation is the situation. In a world where we can get out of our houses, we can still work remotely and be alone, but we need to be checking in all the time. But I think it's a great question because we need to really understand what's happening for people. But Maria asks, how does organisational culture shift in the current environment that may affect the customer's passengers' culture? How do we help shift in customers' culture to address prevention, health risks, etc.? You just take that in, Maria. I would say, without having thought about that too deeply, that the way that we do that is the same way we do it with our people. It's that we communicate really fully. We demonstrate why we need to do things. We think about all the different ways people take on information, what's important to them, and how we get that message across. We then really reward behaviour when it's done well, and we call it out when it's done badly. Customers should be working almost as evangelists for their own health. So passengers should be seeing each other and working to make sure that that whole environment of that carriage or whatever it is in the moment is being looked after and cared for. It's the same approach. If we see others doing the right thing, we tend to do the right thing and we call out poor behaviour. So communicate frequently and communicate often and recognise that people's behaviour is acting out and disruptive because they're really frightened and there's a lot of defiance going on as a coping mechanism for what's happening. I hope I've answered that clearly enough. This is from Paul. To what extent does technology encourage or inhibit connectivity in working from home? Are there still barriers that need to be overcome? Awesome question, Paul. Because we've got great technology and great connectivity doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't still barriers. I mentioned asynchronous communication before, and that basically means that even though it feels like we're in real time, there's a moment between when I speak and when you receive my message. That doesn't mean it's like we're sitting next to each other. So we need to be mindful of that and we need to be clear on how that impacts on the personal interaction. So we need to make sure that we're asking the questions, how are you? What's happening? Did you understand? Was that clear? And that we don't hide behind the technology and we aren't just using a Slack channel or messaging or email, that we're actually making personal contact. When I showed the slide around the different forms of communication, I don't think I've ever had as many phone calls as I've had recently where people are they just want to have that human connection. They want to feel that voice in their ear. So technology really is allowing us. It's the perfect enabler for right now. We have everything we need to, unless you're in an actual face-to-face role. For all of us who are knowledge workers of any sort, we have everything we need to be able to share, to collaborate and to live it in real time and measure our output. But we need to understand that we still need connection, and that's the most critical part. So how do we do connection amongst technology? Can you provide some, this is from Natalie, can you provide some examples of practical values for organisations as opposed to the abstract values most organisations have? Natalie, I love you for asking this question because this comes back to the gauzy values. Values are practical when they're operationalised. So I often use the example of integrity. I feel a lot of organisations that they have their sort of top 5 values and, integrity is one of them. But people don't really unpack that as an organisation. Why is that a value for you? Why do you think that you need to have integrity up on the wall? Why isn't it a baseline of how you just simply behave? So the first part of the answer, Natalie, is that people need to really interrogate their values. Values are best when they're co-designed as an organisation, not when someone's just dashed them off or they've been given to a consultant to write and then stuck up on a wall. So if integrity is one of your organisational values, I need to see in your performance review in every single person in the organisation, how do you do integrity? I need to say to you, hey Natalie, show me how you've done integrity in the last month or in whatever the period that I'm measuring you for is. And if you can't say to me what those values look like in demonstrative action, then they're not to me values that are valuable for the organisation. They're just gauzy values. So the answer to that is they need to be values which actually speak to the purpose of the organisation. What are the values that we have that best support what we do? Brené Brown does a lot of work on values, and she would say that in a personal sense, if you have more than 2 values, you don't have any values. So when we do values workshops and when we'll do the values workshop in the seminar series, we're going to be looking at 2 key personal values. I feel in an organisation 3 or 4 is quite acceptable, but they have to be ones which are relevant to the purpose, which are agreed on by the participants, and which are operationalised and measured and celebrated or punished. Punish is a harsh word, but you know what I mean, if they aren't delivered well. So the real answer to that is that practical values are values which are relevant and operationalised into the business, that people can stand behind and say, hey, you know, that's not one of our values, the way you did that, or you really represented our values well when you did that. It's a great question, Natalie. Thank you. This one for Emma. How do you maintain team morale whilst working remotely, particularly when most organisations are entering their second month from home and uncertain of the end in sight? Communication, 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 Emma. It's the only way. We have to recognise, communicate and bring that stuff into real time. And so we have to name up that we are in uncertain times, but we are really flagging with morale because we just don't know when this is going to end. And all of those different tools and strategies that I've outlined help us to be able to do that really well. Morale happens when we feel seen, we feel heard, we feel valued, we feel rewarded, and we feel productive. Those things can happen, but they have to happen in culture anyway. If being remote or distributed or digital, if that's not happening in your culture already, it's definitely not going to happen when you're on the other end of a screen, far from anything or a water cooler discussion. So building that in, taking the time to actually invest in building culture, thinking about culture, and knowing that it's not just a policy document that goes in a drawer, that everyone has to be doing it, and we have to make mistakes, and we have to be able to come back to a middle so that we know what that single point in place we're heading towards is. Question here from Derek. Is your experience that working from home can cause people to start working longer hours because work's easy to access? This can be dangerous if not controlled. Actually, Derek, that's a great question. I hear that from people quite a lot that, you know, they say to me, oh, but there's no sort of off switch. When I leave work from the office, I step out the doors and work's done. But when I'm at home, I just kind of keep nibbling back into it. My answer to that is that that's about discipline and that's about really good leadership and management. If people are outside of a 9 to 5 where they have a bookend of what they have to do, the question is, when do they need to work most optimally for them? So my husband, for example, he's been working remotely for as long as I have. He goes for a run every day at 11 o'clock, takes the dog out, he's out for an hour and a half. Sometimes he'll work till 7 or 8 at night, but his best productive thinking time is that time when he's out running. He'll go and do some other things, he'll come in and out, but he knows how to self-regulate. So if we're in a high-performance, high-achievement culture that rewards exhaustion, people will be working around the clock. You'll see it in the office, you'll see it at home. The discipline has to be as a manager to sort of say, if you've seen people regularly sending emails at 7 in the morning and 9 at night, you say to them, hey, Derek, what's going on? I'm seeing you working all the time. I want to make sure that you're self-regulating. So it's up to you to have some self-discipline and understand what output looks like and what a good balance of rest, work, exercise, nutrition, hydration is for you. So we're at 1:30 and that's all we've got time for in this webinar. Really, really grateful for your participation. I hope you've got something valuable out of it for your team and for your organisation. Thank you for all the questions. And I really look forward to seeing you in some of the leadership seminars that we're going to be having later on. So thank you so much and look out for an email with the recording on it afterwards.
That's great. Thank you so much, Polly, for your time and presentation today. That's been very valuable. I particularly like your comments around shared purpose and communication realities that you were talking about. But my favourite line of all today was when you talked about equal access to for people being at their best. And I think that's a really powerful line that organisations need to facilitate and support people. Can I thank everybody today for your participation and your questions and coming along. Special thank you to Polly, who was our first person off the rank. Please join us next week on Wednesday, the 29th of April, when Stephen Sanders from Arup will present our next webinar, Future Rail, the transformative power of rail and what changes after COVID-19. That presentation will be based on key findings from Arup's Future of Rail 2050 publication. Stephen will describe how we can better understand the mega trends occurring in the rail industry and how to plan, invest and advocate in light of those. So if you haven't already registered, please do so if that topic is for you. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you very much.